All right, my friends. It is 9:45 on the AM dial, and you know what that means? It's time for Java with Jen. Java with Jen. Java with Jen. Java with Jen. The warmer it gets, the bigger my hair gets. Can we have a minute for that? If you haven't met me yet, I am Jen Koken, your favorite executive leadership coach, working with women in STEM to lead with more authority, influence, and impact. And every week at 9:45 a.m. on Wednesdays here on LinkedIn, I go live with amazing guests to talk about strategies to put you squarely in the driver's seat, give you more power, and make sure that you can impact your team and empower your team and leave the kind of legacy you want to leave. Now, all month, we've been talking with Shirley Bloomfield, who is the president of NTCA, the National Rural, I always have problems saying that word, Rural Broadcast Association. This is a network of 850 rural broadband companies who are in the telecommunications field, obviously, who are working to transform rural America and small town America through innovation. And I have had the pleasure of working with Shirley and many of the GMs of her broadband companies over the last 8 years. And I wanted to bring Shirley on to talk about board dynamics because she had gone from a staff member at NTCA for 20 years to a board member, or to the CEO 15 years ago. The first episode, we just talked about board dynamics in general and kind of how to read the room in a sense. And then last week, we talked specifically about how to read the room and leverage your seat. And today we're going to be talking about claiming your rightful seat at the table, wielding informal power, framing, pre-aligning, and asking strategic questions when you're in a meeting. And who knows where the conversation is going to lead us? Only Shirley knows. And only I know, but we don't really know because we don't know. And you don't know what you don't know.
And that's the fun of it.
What's that?
And that's the fun of it, that you don't know. We just go with it.
We just go with the flow of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So this week we're talking about claiming your seat at the table, because you always say brilliance. You always drop these nuggets of gold at the end of each episode. And last week you did the same thing about how do we claim our seat at the table? So let me just see if there are specific questions I want to ask you. Here's one of them. And I don't think we covered this, but if we did, it bears repeating. When you're finally invited into a leadership conversation, it can be, it can make you feel nervous, right? That's where imposter syndrome kind of comes in. How do you not sit there like a bump on the log for the first year? And how can you not elbow your way in to be rude, but actually claim your authority right up front? Now, one thing you said on one of the previous episodes was don't wait to speak. Within the first hour, say something. So what else can we be doing to claim our authority in these boardrooms and leadership team meetings and other meetings?
Yeah. So I will say I probably have learned more about that in my role as sitting on a board. And it's literally kind of assessing for myself, what are my strengths? Why did they ask me to be on this board? What are the strengths that I bring to this composition? And then what I try to do in a board meeting is I try to play to my strengths, right? So, if it is a conversation, so for example, I sit on a board that is about the security and the reliability of the grid, of the electric grid, the power grid for the Southeast. Well, I am not a power person. I turn on light switches. I don't really know how power works, but I know how Washington works. I know how policy intersects with infrastructure. I run an organization. I know how HR and leadership works. So I don't try to play a role in those board meetings where I don't have that knowledge base. I don't have that authority, but I really try to assess for every board that I sit on, what are my strengths? What can I contribute? And that's kind of the lanes I try to drive in.
Yeah.
Because that's where I know I'm a value add.
So that is killer what you just said. You want to know your own strengths and why is the board asking you to serve, Or even if you're in a meeting, and this is the bane of my existence, which is, people are invited to every single meeting. I never know why. And usually you're invited to a meeting without an agenda. And I've told my clients, if you ever get invited to a meeting without an agenda, let them know you want to see the agenda first. You can be thoughtful. Otherwise, don't go to the meeting because you don't know what's the point of me being here. So number one, kind of assess what do you think your skills and talents and abilities are to contribute. But then nerves kick in and you're in an unfamiliar situation or you feel like you're the only woman at the table. How do you get over that nervousness? Do you have a clue? Not a clue. Do you have a trick that you use?
I have two tricks. My first trick is, and I know we've kind of chatted about this. I am just naturally inquisitive. I just want to know. So what I find is, if I've already assessed my strengths, I want to probe other people's strengths and kind of affirm them as an expert. So, for example, if I'm sitting in a power discussion and they're talking about renewable energy, I will ask a question that, first of all, I'm actually curious about. And second of all, allows others around the table to teach me and feel kind of, like they're bringing me in. And third, I will have said something early in the meeting. So I find those three, doing something like that actually kind of checks three boxes.
I love that.
So I try to think of it. And you know what? Sometimes I get so carried away that I actually write my question down so that I can make sure that when the time is right to ask the question, that I know what I wanted to kind of say. Um, the second piece that I will say, when I'm a little bit nerved up about some meetings and it may be people I don't really know, I absolutely use humor. For me, is my breaking the ice. It is the way to be like, we are all people. We're all part of humanity here. And I will find something not necessarily self-deprecating, but just something funny, a little sassy to just kind of be like, and once people start laughing, I find that it's kind of like, okay, all right, okay, the playing field has now been leveled and
Right.
we're all good. Let's get down to business. But it's just my icebreaker.
Yeah. And then the final question I want to ask you, because I want to be cognizant of our time and keep this to 10 minutes so people can like tune in, watch this, and then go for their bio break or their cup of coffee before their next meeting. How does a person wield influence if they don't have the authority in the room? Maybe as you said in the very, very first episode that we recorded, what is that now, 3 weeks ago, um, or that we recorded, that we went live with. I'm so used to Zoom and recordings and that kind of thing. You said initially the transition from staff to board, it was like the board was woo, that was the room, and staff members could kind of come in and you do your presentation and go. So let's say I'm a staff member coming in to present or coming in for whatever reason. What's a way that I could find myself with authority in that room when maybe I'm not even speaking?
Ah, so I think, first of all, if you're invited into boardroom as a staff person, there's a reason. Board meetings don't typically just look to kind of fill the space. So be mindful. And certainly if your boss is the one who's invited you in there, why? I think it's okay to be, what role would you like me to play? Do you want me to present? Do you want me to just be ready to answer questions? Why am I here, kind of thing, so that you know in advance what your role is. I would also say be extremely mindful. Here's some pitfalls that I've seen in the past. People get in that room and they get very excited. And then when they have something to contribute, they will either sometimes contribute when it's really not their turn to contribute. Boards can be pretty clear about we're the board, you're the staff. And so I think it's again, being able to read the room to, they are now asking for my participation here. So being very careful and reading the room before you jump in, and then read the room while you are providing, something substantive. And by that, I mean, I have a few instances where I've had staff come into the room and the staff has just gone on and on and on, and then made some judgment calls in their presentations. Just being very careful. Again, I don't want anybody to get nerved up, but it's just be mindful. You come in, you've got something to share, you bring a value, share that value, be concise, be sharp. Don't be presenting your own prejudgment on it. And then sit back and let the board view you as an expert to then respond with questions if they so desire. It's very easy for boards to be turned off by staff who get so excited about being in the room and having something to share that they overshare.
You know what I love about what you said, because I don't know if you caught it, but this is what I took away from what you just said. I always love everything that you say. You don't have to give the board everything. You don't have to give them the entire picnic basket. In fact, I always coach people and say, you have your topic, talk about, say what your topic is, say what you're going to talk about what you're going to talk about, then say what you just talked about. And it's always 3 points. Leave them wanting to answer questions. You don't have to sit around and think about, well, what if they have this question or that question? Let me make sure. And I think we sometimes find ourselves wanting to do all the research and give them everything. Bad idea. High points that will leave people open to ask you questions, because then you're creating a power source relationship. You're creating
Absolutely.
right?
You're creating a relationship. And absolutely. Yeah. Have them come back for more.
Have them come back for more. Okay. Before we wrap up, I have one tip. When I walk into a meeting and I look around the room and everyone's like pretty grim, I just assume they have gas.
I will not get that out of my mind.
That's what I do when I'm speaking too, because you're up in front of hundreds and hundreds of people, and people are on their phones and they're doing whatever. How do you engage? I just assume everybody's got gas, even though they're listening to me. So don't make assumptions. Don't, like you said, don't prejudge just by someone's facial expression, because you never know what they're doing. They could be mind melding with you at the same time.
Ooh.
I know. All right, everybody. This is this week's episode of Java with Jen. Shirley, thank you so much for being here. We will be back next week for one final wrap-up session. But in between, don't forget, Shirley is going to be my guest on our Empowering Expert series this month. It's free. It's an hour long. It's going to be Thursday, May 22nd. At 11 a.m. And Shirley will be joining us so we can do a lot of back and forth and questions. So if you have questions about being on a board and power dynamics in that way, or reporting to a board, or being a staff member, please join us. We'll make sure to put the registration link in the chat. And until next time, friends, this is Java with Jen. Take care. Ciao for now.